At 02 am local time, a NASA satellite picked up 2 heat signatures burning in the eastern Jordanian desert at a place called Azraq. On the ground, that was Muafak Salti Air Base, and Iranian ballistic missiles and drones had just come through the dark. At least 2 missiles struck the base. Aircraft shelters were hit, drone facilities were destroyed, and by the time American commanders had a full picture of the damage, the answer they were preparing wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the 7th night of a campaign that was already underway, and the thing that would change over the 9 nights that followed had almost nothing to do with revenge. On July 17, 2026, Iranian ballistic missiles and drones struck Muafak Salti Air Base, according to CENTCOM. At least 2 of those missiles hit the base itself, and the strike was not an opening move. It was retaliation, a response to an American bombing campaign already in progress. That sequence is the part most accounts get backwards. Open-source imagery told a harder story than the first reports. Satellite analysis indicated damage more extensive than initially acknowledged, with aircraft shelters and drone facilities destroyed. 2 heat sources appeared in NASA fire detection data around 2 in the morning, local time. The next day, CENTCOM announced the cost. 2 American service members killed, 1 missing. 4 evacuated to Jordanian hospitals, later released. Unidentified human remains were recovered at the site in Jordan and placed under examination. A 3rd American died in a separate action in northern Iraq during the controlled detonation of unexploded ordnance from a downed Iranian drone. 3 confirmed dead. That brought the total number of US service members killed in this war to 16, according to Axios reporting. Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell put the wounded at close to 100 since July 7th, with 96% returned to duty, most of them mild concussions. Muafak Salti sits at Azraq in Jordan's eastern desert, and it carries the name of a Royal Jordanian Air Force pilot killed in combat with Israeli fighters on November 13, 1966. It is not an American base. It hosts a large American presence, a different thing entirely, and a distinction that shaped every decision made after the missiles landed. If this is useful so far, a quick like genuinely helps the channel. That night only reads as a trigger if you don't know what came before it. The American air campaign against Iran dates to February 28, 2026. Operation Epic Fury. The July strikes were a resumption, not a start, picking up after the collapse of a memorandum of understanding in June. The immediate trigger for that resumption came on June 25th, when an Iranian drone struck a cargo ship in the Strait of Hormuz. No casualties, no major damage. And then the bombing began again. By the 7th night, explosions were reported at Bandar Abbas and Sirik, hitting coastal areas and transport infrastructure further inland. By the 9th, Iranian state media reported blasts at Tabriz, Chabahar, Konarak, Bandar Makhshar, Bandar Imam Khomeini, Jask, Sirik and Bushehr. By the 10th night, Bandar Abbas again, Sirik again, plus Shiraz, Bandar Lenge and Keshem. Aklidi counted at least 120 American strikes on Iran since July 8th. CENTCOM described its target set as surveillance sites, military logistics, underground weapons storage, and maritime capabilities. In its own words, the strikes were designed to further degrade Iranian military capabilities used to attack commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. A second CENTCOM statement went further and made the only explicit link between Azraq and everything that followed, saying the strikes were meant to degrade Iran's ability to threaten shipping and to swiftly punish the Revolutionary Guard forces who had attacked American service members in Jordan the night before. Washington maintains only military targets were struck. That is an interested party describing its own work, and it should be weighed accordingly. The scale of the wider operation is genuinely large. CENTCOM's own operation, Epic Fury fact sheet, claims roughly 6,000 targets struck and more than 90 Iranian vessels damaged or destroyed in the first 13 days. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper reported more than 6,000 combat sorties by mid-March. More than 50,000 American troops are operating across the Middle East. Those are aggregate figures for the war, not for these 10 nights. The nightly totals have not been released. Iran answered where it could. Iranian military sources claimed suicide drones launched at American targets in Kuwait, including an ammunition depot at Camp Arifjan and radar systems at Ali al-Salem Air Base. An explosive drone was intercepted near the US consulate in Erbil, Iraq, according to security officials speaking to Reuters. The Revolutionary Guard warned it would strike American interests across the region on a large scale, and Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi announced Iran was suspending its commitments under the agreement with the United States. The human cost on the Iranian side is contested. Iran's health ministry reported at least 35 dead and more than 300 wounded since the July resumption. The following day, that figure became 50. On July 18th, Iranian officials put it at least 50 dead and more than 500 wounded. On the 17th, Iran had said 46 dead and more than 400 wounded, numbers that move in directions that don't reconcile. Cumulatively, Iran claims more than 3,000 dead since February 28th, including 168 children. CNN states plainly that it cannot independently verify Iranian figures. Ahmad Moradi, a representative from Hormuz, described 7 to 8 civilians killed over 2 nights and said one strike on a bridge destroyed 2 family vehicles and killed 6 people. Every one of those numbers comes from the Iranian government. None of them can be checked. What was actually being hit follows a pattern with nothing to do with the base in Jordan. Strikes hit bridges at Bandar Kamir, a coastal town in Hormuz province on the strait. Iranian state television reported at least 7 killed there. Analysis by the Associated Press found that the attacks on road and rail bridges appeared designed to cut Bandar Abbas off from the routes leading to the central region and Tehran. Other routes remain open, but the AP noted the strikes could expand, with the potential to affect both military materiel and goods moving to Iran's 90 million people. At Chabahar, the port's maritime traffic control tower was damaged. At another major Iranian port, a tower collapsed outright. Iranian open-source accounts also describe tunnel complexes struck at Keshem, though no verifiable inventory of them exists. Then came the water. On July 18th, a strike destroyed desalination pumps and electrical infrastructure at the village of Bunji in Jask County, Hormozgan, reported by the Hormozgan Water and Wastewater Company. Abdulhamid Hamzapour, the company's chief executive, said supply was cut to 20 villages, a population of roughly 10,000 people. The plant produced 3,150 cubic meters a day. The seawater pumping station and the transformer station, in Hamzapour's words, were completely destroyed. The region was under an excessive heat warning when the water stopped. Iranian state broadcaster IREB said restoration would take about a week, with emergency supply operations beginning. Hormozgan's deputy governor for political, security and social affairs, Ismail Dehestani, described the impact on electricity and desalination pumps across villages in western Jask. The US military did not respond to the claim. Energy followed the same line. On July 17th, Iran acknowledged strikes on power infrastructure for the first time, when the Energy Ministry asked for reduced consumption in the southern provinces. The ministry told civilians to switch off air conditioning. Blackouts were reported in parts of Chabahar after explosions. Tehran has never published how much generating capacity it lost or how many people went dark, which is its own kind of answer. Why Hormozgan, specifically, comes down to geography. Bandar Abbas hosts the main headquarters of the Iranian Navy and the naval arm of the Revolutionary Guard. More than 90% of Iranian crude oil exports used to pass through the strait. The IRGC Navy's Saheb-al base sits at Bandar Abbas and is the force's most crucial base because of its proximity to the waterway. Keshem, the largest island in the Persian Gulf, just south of Bandar Abbas, hosts IRGC naval facilities, including the 112th Naval Brigade, along with fast attack craft and missile batteries intended for closing the strait. Jask, east of the strait on the Gulf of Oman coast, has received growing investment to diversify naval basing and move oil exports outside the Persian Gulf. Bandar Abbas sits almost directly across from the UAE and Oman, overlooking both shipping lanes tankers use. Iran's defense of the strait is overwhelmingly land-based. Aerial drones and missiles launched from hardened positions ashore, plus mines laid by small boats. None of this was unannounced. On April 5, 2026, President Trump promised to strike power plants and bridges if Hormuz were not reopened, writing on Truth Social that Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one, in Iran. Back on March 7th, Iran had already accused the United States of striking a desalination plant at Keshem, claiming an interruption to 30 villages, a claim both the US and Israel denied. The AP has described the July strikes as backing up Trump's threats to hit infrastructure and pressure Tehran over the strait. Trump told Fox News he would save energy targets for last. And Israel struck a rail bridge at Kashan in April, with the stated goal of disrupting military logistics. The policy was announced months ago. What changed in July was not the idea. It was the scale and the systematic execution of it, which leads to the uncomfortable part. If Iran's ability to close the strait rests on land, on hardened launch positions, on the boats that lay the mines, on the ports and the roads and the power that keep all of it running, then striking electricity, water and road access is not collateral damage. It is not revenge for 3 dead Americans in Jordan. It is an attempt to strangle the capability itself. Analysts see it differently and the range is wide. Al Jazeera reports assessments running from cutting Iranian supply lines to reducing Iran's leverage over Hormuz. Alex Alfaraz Shears, a London-based military analyst, told Al Jazeera that the expansion beyond conventional military installations pointed somewhere darker. Because the United States is growing increasingly frustrated, particularly President Trump, and therefore becoming more desperate, we could see the early stages of a preparation for something like a limited ground invasion on those strategic outposts, but also into territorial Iran proper. Iranian state media has gone further, citing a New York Times assessment that deliberately targeting a water facility constitutes a war crime, an attribution that arrives second-hand through Tehran. Then, there is the number that undercuts all of it. Lloyd's List. Intelligence tracked non-Iranian linked transits through the Strait of Hormuz, falling to 25 in the week of July 13th to 19th, down from 108 the week before. Total traffic is running roughly 90% below the previous year. Inbound arrivals dropped to 8 vessels, against 43 the week prior and 76 at the start of July. Iranian-linked traffic proved more resilient, 21 transits against 31. IMF Portwatch counted 10 transits on July 12th, against a pre-crisis baseline of 88 a day, 11% of normal. Before February 28th, roughly 100 ships passed through daily, half of them tankers. At least 9 vessels have been attacked since July 6th. 1 mariner was killed and 3 wounded aboard the tanker Al-Bahya off the coast of Oman, according to the International Maritime Organization. The cost of that came home on July 20th, when the American national average for gasoline crossed back above $4 a gallon, $4.03 cents, against $3.87 a week earlier and $3.14 a year ago. Brent crude sat near $90.70, up 2.5% in a day. 10 nights of strikes, 6,000 targets across the war, water cut to 10,000 people, power rationed across the southern provinces, bridges dropped into the routes to Tehran, and the strait is still effectively closed. That is the shape of this campaign. Not punishment for a night in the Jordanian desert, but a systematic attempt to take apart the land-based machinery that lets Iran hold a waterway shut. An attempt that so far has not reopened it. 9 nights cut water and power to a province. If this ever becomes an open war, the first hours look very different. That video is on the screen.